Modern logistics rely on seamless movement, but trade between the United States and Mexico is accelerating at a staggering rate. By 2025, U.S.-Mexico trade is projected to top $872.8 billion. This volume is physically altering how freight moves across the southern border, placing intense pressure on existing supply chain nodes. The core constraint is geographic. Our current infrastructure lacks the spatial and operational capacity to absorb this volume at a few concentrated crossing points. This map of North America illustrates the issue. Massive trade routes, marked by these teal arrows, funnel freight from across the continent directly into a handful of Texas-Mexico border crossings. We are watching a systemic collision. Macroeconomic demand is slamming into highly localized geographic realities. To manage this bottleneck, the Texas Department of Transportation adopted the Texas-Mexico Border Transportation Master Plan, or BTMP, in 2021. It represents a $37.4 billion capital deployment. That funding is distributed across 661 specific infrastructure projects. The strategy integrates binational policy coordination directly into the engineering phase to synchronize legal protocols with physical transit. The objective is to engineer a modernized multimodal network designed to keep people and goods moving across the border without stopping. The BTMP represents a structural overhaul of the North American supply chain's most critical choke points. Looking at the 661 projects, the funding split shows $32.7 billion allocated to projects in Texas and $4.7 billion for projects in Mexico. Of that total, $6 billion is dedicated directly to 193 specific border crossing projects. However, a much larger sum, $31.4 billion, is being spent on 468 broader corridor projects leading up to the border. This pie chart breaks down project costs by category. Notice the silver sliver. Only 1.6% goes to basic asset preservation. Compare that to the massive green wedge taking up 54.9% of the total budget. The priority here is capacity and speed. Beyond how the money is categorized, we have to look at where this capital is physically deployed across the state of Texas. This map of Texas is color-coded by TXDOT district types, detailing the 2024 funding distribution. The general statewide balance is relatively small at $8.7 billion. By contrast, capital is highly concentrated in metro districts, absorbing $44.7 billion, and urban districts taking $23 billion. The primary nodes absorbing this capital impact directly at the border are the districts of Laredo, Pharr, and El Paso. Supply chain velocity requires heavy, concentrated financial injections precisely at these urban convergence nodes. But statewide highway capacity only solves part of the equation. We have to look at the ground-level reality of moving freight from one country to another. This is localized friction in practice, endless lines of heavy trucks inching forward, trapped within the confines of dense, dusty commercial staging yards. This introduces the concept of cross-border drayage, the short-distance transport of goods required to bridge the physical gap between two national networks. A truck hitting the border on time does not mean the freight will actually arrive on schedule. Delays occur during the handoff execution, the high-risk moments when freight changes custody and shifts between different trucking equipment. The specific operational frictions include customs processing and staging yards that are out of sync with the necessary paperwork. The speed of the highway network meets a hard ceiling at the handoff point. Until these micro-frictions are resolved, they remain the primary constraint on total system velocity. Laredo, Texas is the prime example of where macro flow collides with these micro-frictions. Laredo faces a severe geographic constraint, relying on a single interstate, I-35, as its only major connection to the rest of the country, and I-35 does not efficiently serve freight trips destined for the Northwest, compounding the routing problem. This single route dependency funnels a massive volume of international trucks directly into localized city streets. This aerial map of Laredo highlights the engineered interventions planned for the sector. The red line shows the $344.1 million US 59 freeway upgrade, bypassing local commercial zones between International Boulevard and Jackman Road. To keep trucks moving, the plan relies on direct connectors, like the $115 million project linking Interstate 35 to the new freeway, eliminating stoplights and street-level intersections for heavy freight. There is also a $1.4 billion Laredo Outer Loop project designed to route traffic from future international bridges directly to I-35. These bypasses, loops, and direct connectors function as physical workarounds, isolating high-speed interstate freight from sluggish, localized drayage friction. There is another engineering solution, removing the freight from the road entirely. In 2023, the historic CPKC railway merger was finalized. This merger physically and corporately combined the legacy Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Southern networks. It created the first and only transnational railway network that directly connects Canada, the United States, and Mexico. A continuous rail network alters the custody chain paradigm. Freight can cross international borders without the need to stop and shift equipment. Single trains can move massive volumes of shipping containers seamlessly across the continent. This transnational rail line acts as a high-volume release valve, providing cross-border logistics that bypass the localized bottlenecks of truck drayage. Zooming back out to the state level, the strategy extends beyond Laredo. Engineering a resilient network requires geographic load balancing across the entire border. Strategic trade gateways like Del Rio and Eagle Pass currently lack direct interstate highway facilities, creating a distinct vulnerability. By upgrading these secondary corridors to interstate standards, traffic can be physically routed away from primary bottlenecks. When managing nearly $900 billion in trade, redundancy and alternative routing provide the necessary stability to the network. Maintaining fluidity at the border requires a multi-tiered approach. It takes macroeconomic capital allocation, precise geographic load balancing, the elimination of local street-level friction, and deep multimodal rail integration. We are rapidly approaching a horizon where trade between the U.S. and Mexico will cross the $1 trillion mark. At that scale, adding more trucks to the highway will not yield proportional economic returns without making structural changes to the choke points. Logistical advantages in the coming years will depend on the spatial and operational engineering of cross-border transfer points.